Okay. Thank you, and thank you for coming. First of all, to those who have decided to join us physically, but we expect also to have some audience on YouTube because this event is going to be streamed by NUPI on NUPI's YouTube channel, and this stream is going to be available until the end of YouTube, most probably. So don't be afraid that the audience is fairly limited. June is always a very difficult period because most of our colleagues at NUPI are traveling a lot to take part in different events, not only in Oslo and Norway, but also all over the world. It's also demanding for other reasons, but we hope very much that the message we are about to convey today is going to reach a little bit broader audience. I have tried to involve as many Poles in Norway as possible, and we would most probably face a much bigger challenge if all of them were to come to join us, because there are like 120,000 Poles, and NUPI doesn't have this type of facilities to have them take part in this. We will have today an interesting, I hope, presentation of the first early findings of a project that NUPI has been involved in since 2023, together with the leading Polish think tank, the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. And the idea behind this project was to look at how Polish and Norwegian perceptions of security have been influenced by the ongoing war in Ukraine, and to also provide some advice to policymakers in both countries, but also in NATO. So I will start by presenting very shortly this project. NORPOLFACTOR is the name of the project, which I would like to... Okay. Okay. The project has received relatively generous funding from the Polish Norwegian Bilateral Fund, which is a part of the Norway EEA grants. Is being conducted jointly by NUPI and the Casimir Pulaski Foundation, that is the leading Polish think tank. Also, it's important to mention that the Casimir Pulaski Foundation is the main organizer of the Warsaw Security Forum, that is the most important security conference in Poland, and having in mind Poland's central place in Central Europe, most probably also one of the leading conferences in this part of Europe. As I have already mentioned, the project started in April 2023 and is going to last until December 2024. The aim of the project, which as I have already mentioned, is to develop enhanced knowledge about Norway in Poland, about Poland in Norway, and to see how security policies of those two countries have changed after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. But we also look at what we can learn from each other and so on. So this is very shortly the information behind the project, and this is what the project has planned and to do and is about to achieve. In the spring 2023, we conducted two public opinion polls, one in Norway and one in Poland, where we asked the same questions, around 35 questions concerning various aspects of security and mutual perceptions. Then we decided also, and we promised to organize several events. We had an event in Warsaw in June 2023 together with the Casimir Pulaski Foundation, where we managed to invite some Polish policymakers for a frank and open discussion. This was a closed seminar where there were no journalists, so we had an opportunity to have a very frank exchange of views. And then we also promised to have an event, a public event in Oslo, which this event that we are a part of is the realization of this element of this plan. And then we also we aim also to have a panel on Polish-Norwegian relations in the context of NATO membership at what we plan today, what we plan to be NUPI's annual Russia conference, where we very much hope to see some colleagues coming from Poland to share their views. And then, last but not least, we have also promised to have a final conference, final seminar in Brussels to share the findings of this project dealing with security policies of two countries that border on Russia, which always poses a challenge to a broader Brussels code. And in order to leave a track of what we have been doing in this project, we also promised to publish 4 working papers and 4 policy briefs. We have just published a report, NORPOLFACTOR working paper, that is called Polish-Norwegian Perceptions and Interactions, that is available here and also online as a PDF file that can be downloaded, where we decided to look at various aspects of Polish thinking and Norwegian thinking about security, what is the impact of self-perceptions, and what we also decided to call self-deceptions when it comes to security. And we also in this report decided to look at what we defined as perceptual gaps that have been revealed by those 2 public opinion polls that were conducted in 2023 in Poland and in Norway. So without further ado, I will now ask my Polish colleagues to present the Polish views on security. Then I will follow up with presenting my understanding of what has happened in the Norwegian thinking about security over the past couple of years. And then finally, I will also present those perceptual gaps as revealed by those public opinion polls, and towards the end of this event we will also have a chance to discuss those questions that have to do with where we see areas of cooperation between Poland and Norway on the bilateral level, but also within those institutions that both Norway and Poland are members of. And then we will also open for questions from the audience. So please, I don't know which of the 2 CPF Tomaszys is going to start, but now it's your turn. I would also only mention finally that this NORPOLFACTOR project is one of the projects that we conduct with different partners in Europe. Another project that NUPI is also involved in is one that involves NUPI and New Strategy Center, the leading Romanian think tank, and we have also just published a very interesting report on Norway and Romania, how the 2 countries deal with questions related to information warfare. That is also a topic that is very high on the national and international agenda for the time being. Tomasz, I will pass the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakub. So my name is Tomasz Smura, a member of the board at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Jakub kindly introduced our institution to you, and Jakub gave me not so easy task, to brief you about Polish security, threat perception and Polish security policy. And you know that in Central and Eastern Europe, everything is complicated, so Poland is not the exception. So I will try to do my best, to brief you shortly on that. Nevertheless, there's, according to our report, there are some factors that define our security policy. And when it comes to Poland and more wider Central Eastern Europe, it's of course the sense of the danger and distrust in general. So as you all know, Polish history was very complicated. So we fought many wars during our history with our neighbors. More than 120 years then Poland was divided and occupied by the neighbors, Prussia, Austrian Empire and Russia. 50 years under the more than 50 years under the in the sphere of influence of the Soviet Union, heavy losses during the Second World War. So all those factors still like shaping Polish threat perception, and it influence our sense of security. Of course, Poland, on the other hand, Poland feel, because of our geopolitical location in the middle of Europe and on the border between, let's say, between the Christianity and Orthodox Church, Poland feel some kind of special role and special mission in this part of the world, which also is embodied in the idea of Prometheus. It's concept from the mid-war period, where according to which we have kind of special role when it comes to the East. So I will say a few words about it later. So when it comes to our threat perception, so of course, as you know, from the Polish point of view, the Russia, it's like main threat for Russia. It's main threat from the Polish point of view when it comes to our security. So, for the many countries from the Western world, the Russian invasion in February 2022 against Ukraine was kind of the wake-up call. But it's not the case when it comes to such countries as Poland, Romania, or the Baltic states. So, and in our opinion, the Russian invasion is absolutely not about, I don't know, protecting Russian-speaking minority or, build the security, better security architecture, and it's not about the Russian, threat perception. It's rather about the continuation of the more general policy aimed at recreating kind of the 19th century style balance of power system in Europe, with the sphere of influence, buffer zones, and so on and so forth. So Russia invasion is continuation of such Russian actions as invasion against Georgia in 28, the first invasion against Ukraine in 2014, annexation of Crimea, operation in Donbass, and so on and so forth. Russia also implemented between 2014 and 2022 the huge GPW Armed Forces Modernization Program. It was $600 billion worth program aimed at modernization of the Russian armed forces, which was focused on the purely offensive capabilities, like new mine battle tanks, long-range precision strike capabilities, Iskander missiles, Su-55 fighters, and so on and so forth. So they are not capabilities to defend itself, but they are rather, created for offensive purposes. And of course, part of this policy was, to make European states dependent on the Russian fossil fuels, and of course, it was perceived by the Polish authorities, Polish people, as a kind of threat. So according of our national security the strategy, it should be assumed that Russian Federation will continue its policy undermining the current international order and rebuild its power and sphere and influence. So it's quote from our national security strategy. So basically, it's Russia which is perceived as main threat to the Polish security. So to support what I said, 43 of Poles consider the threat to our security, our country, as high or very high. Why another 43% as a medium? So Polish people feel feel to be threatened. Only 13% of Polish people feel strong sense of security. Because of history, in Poland we have to some extent also, let's say, limited trust in allies. So actually there is still something like Yalta ghost, and we in general Polish people feel that during Second World War we are to some extent left alone by our allies that time, France, United Kingdom, and during the Yalta conference, despite that Polish soldiers were involved, all across the world fighting against Nazi Germany, we were put under the Russian sphere of influence during the Cold War. So actually it still influenced our thinking about international relations and approach to the allies. Nevertheless, which is paradoxical to some extent, 70% of Poles have positive attitude to NATO. 65 believe that NATO is best response to the threats and security challenges we basically have at this stage of history. As I mentioned, on the other hand, Poland feel kind of the special role when it comes to the international relations, especially the Central and Eastern Europe. So Poland consider itself like traditionally as a kind of the bastion of Christianity. It's also the result of our history, Battle of Vienna, the war against Bolshevik, which we perceived as something which stopped the Bolshevik invasion against Europe, which also was continued during the communist time, in the framework of solidarity movement, which also we think as helped to finish the Cold War. And as I mentioned, special feeling of kind of the destiny, let's say, when it comes to the East. So Prometheus, which today it's embodied by our special kind of the feeling when it comes to our role in European Union in Eastern policy. So as you remember, Poland supported heavily Eastern Partnership together with Sweden, and is heavily involved in EU policy towards East. So when it comes to our security policy, so I would say that our policy is based on the 5 pillars. So first of all, as we discussed, is NATO and strong relations with the United States. So basically, Poland is very strongly a pro-American country. So we consider NATO as our main external, let's say, guarantor of the security, with the leading role of United States. So by definition, Poland is to some extent skeptic, or at least has a limited support for any kind of European Union autonomy, which could undermine the leading role of NATO as a guarantor of the European security. But of course, the big question, elephant is in the room. It's November election and in United States, and approach of the future U.S. administration towards NATO, and possibly how it can influence the U.S. role in NATO, and maybe in this context, we can change to some extent our approach towards the stronger defense cooperation within the EU or within the regional framework. On the other hand, Poland seriously treats its armed forces. So we of course have all these external the factors, but nevertheless we are trying to first of all focus on our own capabilities. As sometimes it's quoted that Article 3 comes before Article 5. So first of all duty of each NATO states is first of all to build its own strong defense capabilities. And of course, Poland also cooperate in regional formats. So B9, it's one of them. So it's kind of the regional cooperation between Baltic states, Poland, Weimar country, V4 countries, and Romania and Bulgaria. So it's a format of coordination of security policy, within the wider NATO structure. There are also some different formats, including Scandinavian countries. So we can discuss them later, because it's also part of our discussion and the seminar. When it comes to our defense policy, so as I said, because differently than many Western countries, we considered Russian previous actions as a part of more wider policy aimed at rebuilding Russian empire, let's say. We earlier started our changing of our mentality when it comes to our defense. So at the beginning of 2010s, we in Poland, let's say, introduced our so-called Komorowski doctrine. It was from the surname of our president at that time. So according to it, our armed forces and our defense policy should be more concentrated on the territorial defense. Before of that, after we joined NATO in very specific period for NATO, it was 1999, NATO was totally focused on the out of area kind of operation, which also influenced our armed forces modernization. So we were focused on such capabilities like long-range transportation capabilities, light infantry fighting vehicles, on the wheeled, modus. So they were very useful when it comes to the out of area operation in such places like Afghanistan, Iraq, or others, but not so when it comes to the defense of the territory of Poland. So and in this period of time, we also increased our defense spending to almost 2% of GDP. After that, they were only growing. In 2016, we had a defense review. So according to it, the scale of the threat from Russia aggressive policy previously was underestimated. So it's a quotation from the defense review. And the goal of Polish armed forces, as I said before, should be first of all to defend our own security. Of course, there were based on the defense review, there was also some change when it comes to the command structure in Poland. So we dissolved 4 the branches commands and replaced them by 2 joint commands. The review recommended also to build our anti-access area denial system. So the recommendation was to focus on the long-range precision strike capabilities, air defense, surface-to-air systems, and so on and so forth. Also, the new generation submarines was recommended, 5th generation fighters, and so on and so forth. And according to review, our defense spending should be increased to 2.5% of GDP in 2020-2030. So the Russian aggression of Ukraine and in February 2020 only accelerated, this mentality and armed forces modernization. In March 2020, our parliament assumed the increase, the Homeland Defense Act, which increased the defense spending to level of 3% GDP in 2023 and 4% of GDP 2024. So this year we actually have, I believe, the highest, proportion to GDP when it comes to defense spending in whole the NATO. So actually, it's even more than United States has right now. So thanks to the increase of defense spending, we implemented second phase of our huge program of air defense system modernization. So in total, we procured 8 batteries of Patriot in the most modern version, 360 degrees radars and so on and so forth, the most advanced one. We decided to procure big amount of new mine battle tanks. So 250 M1A2 plus 116 M1A1 Abrams. So and 180 Koreans K2. So just after the Russian invasion in February, Poland decided to procure around 500 tanks. So you can imagine. So I believe it's more tanks than, for example, Germany and United Kingdom have all together. So it's what we just procured after the Russian invasion. And our plan are even more ambitious. So Poland in longer perspective plan to implement additional 800 K2 tanks, which will be partly produced in Poland. Poland decided also to procure new Haubitsers, approximately 200 in K9 Korean version, and additionally 440, which will be also produced in Poland. That's the assumption. Huge number of long-range precision strike capabilities like HIMARS. So we sent letter of request to United States government for totally 600 HIMARS. So actually, it's I believe right now more than even like U.S. Army has in stock. Poland also declared to procure 96 H-46 64 Apache helicopters. So Poland, if they will be implemented, Poland will be the second biggest user of this kind of equipment in the world. As I said previously, even before the Russian aggression, we decided to procure F-35. So 32 of them will be delivered, I believe, before 2030, and additionally 38 of Korean light fighters FA-50. So this is about the procurement. The second most important thing, it's manpower in the Polish armed forces. So directly after the first Russian invasion against Ukraine 2014, we realized that our forces, when it comes to our manpower, are definitely not enough. So it was the reason why we implemented the idea of so-called territorial defense. And on the beginning, it was kind of the controversial idea, because there were some voices that maybe building like light infantry on the contemporary battlefield, it will be like consuming money which can be better spent for more advanced equipment and so on and so forth. But right now this project is to some extent, I would say, successful. So our ambition, it was to create 17 brigades of the light infantry, 53,000 in total. So right now, the project is like, I would say, 60% of advanced. So right now, territorial defense is around 35,000 of troops, and there is still interest of Polish people to join this kind of formation. When it comes to our total size of our armed forces, the ambition of the previous Ministry of Defense, as you remember, that in November last year there was election in Poland, so there can be some review when it comes to our defense policy. But previously the goal we announced is to have 300,000 troops, a strong army in total, of which 250 are expected to be professional soldiers and 50 in the territorial defense we discussed. So you know, we in Poland we have same kind of problem as like many different countries of Europe, including kind of now United Kingdom, that you know it's very difficult to convince young people to join, you know, voluntarily armed forces. So Polish MOD is building like system of you know, encouraging of the young people to join the armed forces, including some financial you know, benefits and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, you know, this number looks, you know, from the also demographic point of view, and of course, you know, you probably know that Polish economy it's doing relatively well. So you need to use, you know, some tools to convince young people to plan their career, you know, not in companies, private business, but in military. So as I said, probably the manpower, you know, but also training logistics can be the biggest challenge when it comes to the implementation of the all you know, projects and plans we have. And also, you know, the procurement of such big number of capabilities, you know, is sometimes criticized as unrealistic. Of course, it's consumed a lot of money, and we need to prepare, as I said, infrastructure and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, even if we implement, you know, like 50%, let's say, of all the assumptions we have here, I would say that it can really change the balance of power on the NATO eastern flank. So it's a really huge deal what we are doing in Poland right now. Thank you very much. That's all.
Hi, for how to that. I used to study in Denmark, so I have some knowledge of Norwegian, but mostly from listening, less from pronunciations. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you for Tomek gave you a bit of this macro picture. I would like to sum some of the recent developments in Poland and tell you how those issues that Tomek was talking about are perceived by the Polish population. If I could, how do I use that? Yes, so I want to say about the perception of the pre-war era, which was recently mentioned by the Prime Minister Donald Tusk, how it affects the young people, how it's affecting the Polish population. Then we're going to talk about the war that we already have in the Polish soil, which is the hybrid war, not only with Russia, but also in the Belarus that seems to be increasingly considered as part of the Russian military empire. And then I want to summon two interesting, from I believe Norwegian perspective, points, which is energy problems of Polish security that we're gonna face in early 2030s, and Polish ambiguous approach to China and if it's sustainable in the long term, because I believe that in Norway there is also like very pragmatic approach towards the Middle Kingdom, and considering Polish very close cooperation with United States, it's something that it's worth discussing. But yeah, in March, Donald Tusk has mentioned that we are no longer living in the post-Cold War period. We are living in the pre-war period. And if you go to Poland, if you happen to speak Polish, if you take your headphones off in the tram, you could really hear that people talk about it. There are those questions, okay, are you going to escape? What are you going to do? Are you moving more to the west? You could even see the increase of Polish capital, private capital, going to Spanish housing market because people are afraid to invest in Poland. There is also a reason that like Polish housing market is in crisis. There is very big bubble, but there is another reason. But you can see that people are thinking about their life in the long term, because we are really thinking it's happening. But on the other hand, the war is already happening for the 2 years, and we got too used to it. Like those of you who travel to Kyiv, you probably have seen that this is a city that is normally functioning, and we as Poles, like, okay, we remember that the war is there, but we also want to live our life. And this is something that can be seen in this poll conducted in May, that that 26% of the population, just if Poland is invaded, they will try to live normally. The war is probably going to be happening in the north eastern part of Poland, so most of the cities should be safe. And the Ukrainian perspective, Ukrainian experience, shown us that you can have your own life even if the war is happening. Only 16 people, 20 people consider moving abroad. Those are mostly, this ratio is higher among women than among the men. And surprisingly, like 33% is not such a bad case for people that that would like to stay and fight for the freedom. So this is the war that is already happening, that Russia wants to make us feel that even if it's not going to invade us, we are going to be afraid of it, we are going to talk about it, we are going to discuss about it, and we are going to consider that. And this is something that is already happening in the Polish mindset. And the proof of this is the hybrid war that is currently happening in Poland. And I want to summon the case of the recent wildfires in Poland. Basically, May was very dry season this year. For long 2 weeks, the meteo stations were saying that the risk of the wildfires in Poland is very high, that please do not do any barbecue in the forest because it can spread. And in this period, we had in one day 4 very suspicious wildfires in Warsaw that later by Minister of Justice, but also by the Adam Bodnar, but also by the Minister of Foreign Affairs Radosław Sikorski, were mentioned that probably Russian intelligence had something to do with it. And what later happened in the Polish media was crazy, because, you know, this is the period when wildfires are happening every day in Poland. Like firefighters across the country are intervening probably dozen if not more times. And every single wildfire was summoned in the media, was presented as, oh, did Russians choose another target? Are Russians like firing us up? So yes, probably Russians had something to do with some of those wildfires, but the spread of fear among Polish population is worth noting, that immediately we are feeling that the Russians are among us, the Russians are already infiltrating us, and every single wildfire that is happening in the very dry season has to have something to do with Russia. But it's also seen, we also see the increased amount of attack in the cyberspace. Of course, our foundation faces that every day, some malign movements from Russia. I can proudly say that we are officially listed as enemy organization for Russia, which we are very proud of. But it implies that we are facing some cyber threats. And also we have very problematic situation currently at the border with Belarus. In 2021, there was this Przewodów event where a Ukrainian defense missile happened to land in Poland and kill 2 field workers. Those were 2 first victims of the war in Ukraine. But literally yesterday we had a 3rd victim. For the first time, Polish soldier died defending the country. Basically, those are not anymore peaceful migrants from 2021. Those are well-trained by Belarusian intelligence people that are having knives attached to the sticks, and I think at least 3 soldiers have been wounded by those attacks, and 1 because of the wounds died yesterday in Warsaw. And this spread big. This is widely commented in Poland. A lot of political a lot of opinion makers are saying that why Polish soldiers were not shooting to those migrants. And this is something that Belarus really would like us to do. Like, they want to escalate the situation. They want to raise the tensions. They want us to do something about it. And from my perspective, like this is something that Poland should not do, but eventually it can be forced to. So this is increasingly dangerous situation. Right now, we already built a wall on the border with Belarus, but we are right now thinking about creating a buffer zone with no movement of people. So this is very problematic because, as you probably know, in 2021, Poland was accused of some pushbacks. This is a very sensitive issue when a lot of human rights dilemmas are coming in, but recent events are radicalizing Polish society for sure, regarding and also you could see from the comments from the leading politicians that we're gonna take a harder line on the Belarus after this event. And now let me jump to the energy, which is important from the Norwegian perspective because we heavily rely on the Norwegian gas right now. Thanks to the Baltic pipe, we could phase out Yamal Canal and our dependence on Russia. But because of years of underinvestment and because of very old energy system, we are facing probable energy gaps in 2030 if not everything will go under our perfectly tight and time-sensitive schedule. Basically, we want to increase the production capacity in renewables, the green one. We want to include the we are building nuclear capacities, and we're gonna slowly phase out gas, coal, and lignite. However, the problem is that nuclear investment still didn't even start. The official Polish document also include small module reactors to be implemented in mid 2030s. The technology that has not yet been implemented on the mass scale. Regarding the renewables, Poland does not have a big river flows as Norway. Poland. The entire winter is cloudy and we don't have that much sun power neither. So the question is whether we can rely on renewables that much as those documents predict. And also our grid is not ready for such an increase in renewables. Also, most of renewable lands and possible nuclear locations are located in the northern part of the region of the Poland, whereas the population centers are in the south. So it implies that we need to totally rebuild our grid system to go from the north to the south. So also we are investing in the grid. So as you can see, and on the top of that, our coal mines, which we want to phase out eventually, are really old and can break any moment basically. So if none of those there is a lot of variables into the system, and if one of those puzzles is going to be missed, then we're going to face a serious situation of lack of a gap of an energy, which will inquire that we have to invest also in interconnectors with our neighbors, all our neighbors, basically, from Ukraine through the Baltic Sea to Germany. But another threat that recently has started to be discussed in Poland is what are the lessons learned from Ukrainian crisis, that basically two spread energy system proved to be not that efficient during the war as concentrated. Like Ukraine is not relying energetically on wind and solar. It is nuclear, gas, and coal. So this is the first thing. Second thing is that do we have a schedule? Do we have the crisis scenarios in case of a crisis to take energy from our neighbors? Another problem in case we are invaded, right? Another problem is that Tomek recently was presenting you very ambitious military projections of Poland. The problem is that there is really not close alignment of the energy policy with the military increase spending. So basically this big army, massive army, will require a lot of fuel, a lot of oil, which does not necessarily correlate with our energy plans. And then there is always the case of the crisis where when the fuel demand will rise only more significantly. Right now, it starts to be really big deal among the politicians. It's like nuclear has bipartisan support, and both parties, I think, like acknowledge the decades of underinvestments, and something is being happened. Like this issue is taken very seriously. But as I said, this might be problematic for us in 2030s if something is not going to go according to our plan. And last thing that I want to mention is our China policy, which is pretty complicated right now among expert society in Warsaw. There is a big discussion whether our status quo of very dichotomic or even trichotomic EU policy towards China is sustainable in the long run. So basically, we cooperate where it's necessary. We compete where it's we cooperate where it's possible. We compete where it's necessary, and we are rivals where it's unavoidable. And Poland would like to see a larger amount of Chinese investments in the country. That includes building our own brand of electric car, Izera. We are taking the technology from the Chinese. Also, as you have seen on the previous panel, we want to increase our renewable capacity. Much of it goes from the solar panels, which, as you know, are the niche and very competitive niche of the Chinese market. And there is this pragmatic approach that we have nothing to lose with the Chinese, so we should cooperate with them. We should engage them because they have more to offer, and we will not gain anything by deteriorating the relations with China. However, on the other hand, if you go to the lower level of the slide, there is no doubt that China heavily sponsors the Russian war machine. If there is one country, one leader that could do something about the war in Ukraine right now, it is either in Washington or in Beijing. And Beijing wants this conflict to be prolonged. We will see how the peace negotiations in Switzerland will go this month. But the question is whether there is any effect of the talks and diplomatic effort we are doing, because there is a big diplomatic fatigue that Olaf Scholz goes to Beijing, Macron welcomes Xi Jinping in Europe, and there is nothing out of this cooperation. Like even business-wise, you know, like China did not sign any big contracts with European companies in the recent during the recent visit. So experts are asking ourselves and the community, what are we actually having from the cooperation with China? Because also Poland has very bad history with China regarding the investments. There was this famous failure of construction of the highway, and also most of the greenfield investments of China are located in the Western Europe, not in Central and Eastern Europe. And if Poland would like to see itself as a leader of the Central and Eastern Europe, and that's something that we think in Casimir Pulaski Foundation, we should help our neighbors, which is Czechia, Lithuania, and Baltic countries, which have much more assertive policy toward China, which are more supportive towards Taiwan. And there is a potential for it. Recently, in Poland, we hosted Vice President-elect of Taiwan, Xiaobi Kim. She traveled to Brussels, Czechia, Poland, and Lithuania. So, like, it also shows that Taiwan recognized that there is this possibility of maybe dragging Poland towards this more assertive position, because then if Central and Eastern Europe is able to speak in one voice over China, it is more probable that the EU will able to pressure China more on the war against Ukraine. And basically, also, we recognize the fact that Lithuania and Czech Republic did not lose that much over deteriorating their relations with China. Those are mostly diplomatic deterioration, but business-wise, it did not suffer. It did not suffer that much. And also, we, for last 15 years in Poland, were saying that Europe is over-dependent on Russia, that Russia is enemy state, and right now we are doing exactly the same with China, so it's finally time for us to take lessons from our own mistake. But as I said, those two forces are going to two different directions, so right now the Polish policy is pretty ambiguous. It's not antagonizing China too much, but I can imagine that with quickly deterioration of public support for China, for public trust in China among all European countries actually, and with a little bit more pressure from United States, not only to Poland but also to the other European countries, this could go pretty quickly into one of those two scenarios. That's all from me. I'm going to be happy to discuss later further those issues. I think now time from Professor Kazimierski. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to continue. What I'm going to share with you now is my own personal understanding of the developments in the Norwegian foreign and first and foremost security and defense policy over the past couple of years, how the developments in Ukraine have influenced Norwegian thinking about security and how this thinking has been translated into several policy steps that we have seen happening. Some of those issues are already addressed in the report that I have already mentioned, but I will focus my presentation on those two questions, the Norwegian self-perceptions and self-deceptions, focusing first and foremost on Norway's relations with Russia that are the main factor shaping Norwegian thinking about security, and then paying also some attention to Norway's role as a NATO member in the north. And towards the end of my presentation, I will also pay some attention to this issue of those perceptual gaps that have been revealed by those two public opinion polls. So when we think about Russia as a factor shaping Norwegian thinking about security and defense policy, we need to understand that what is most probably the main element shaping this thinking about Russia as an element that needs to be taken into account is the question of this very clear strategic asymmetry that is also something that has influenced Norwegian policy towards first the Soviet Union and then towards Russia over the past 60, 70 years. In addition, this is not reflected in this slide where I only showed those strategic asymmetries in the post-Soviet period. We need also to understand that when Norway decided to join NATO in 1949, not join NATO but be one of the founding fathers of the alliance, it was also mostly due to the ideological dimension of this confrontation, because there was this fear that Soviet Union could promote this ideology that was not very well received in the Norwegian society, and this was this experience of the communist takeover in Czechoslovakia in 1948 that made the Norwegian policymakers decide to join NATO. And NATO has since 1949 been a key element in the Norwegian thinking about security. Some years ago, 20 years ago, some NUPI colleagues published a book about Norwegian security policy, and they came with this idea of a strategic triangle that is something that we need to understand when we try to have a good understanding of what are the factors that shape Norwegian thinking about security. It's about three types of relations. It's about, as I have already mentioned, this issue of dealing with the strategic asymmetry in relation to Russia. Then it's also about having a working relationship with the European Union. Norway is not a member of the European Union, but is mostly influenced by the European Union when it comes to things starting with regulatory aspects of cooperation to economic aspects of cooperation. And then it's also very clear that NATO is an alliance that provides Norway with a high level of deterrence against Russia. It's also a vehicle facilitating Norway's strategic cooperation with the United States and also with the European Union, because most of the members of the European Union are also members of NATO. So the European Union plays kind of there are two dimensions, the purely economic one, but also the fact that there is a huge overlap in memberships between the European Union and NATO, which also shapes this Norwegian thinking about policy. And when we think about Norwegian policy towards Russia, during the Cold War, there were those two ideas that informed Norwegian thinking about Russia. It was the issue of being member of a well-functioning Western military alliance as a way of deterring Russia. But then there was also this idea that in order to increase the level of security, Norway decided also to implement the so-called self-imposed restrictions on its membership in NATO. And when the Soviet project collapsed in 1991, Norway has also embarked to a very large extent on the policy of engaging Russia in a kind of positive manner, helping Russia deal with some transition-related issues involving Russia in various forms of regional cooperation, starting with the Barents Euro-Arctic region, Russia and Norway joining the Arctic Council, the issue of helping Russia deal with the environmental questions related to the commissioning of the nuclear submarines on the Kola Peninsula, where Norway and the United States decided to join forces in this Arctic military environment cooperation, helping Russia deal with the issue of environmental pollution caused by nickel and so on and so on. So Norway has invested a lot of effort to engage Russia. But when Russia decided to use its military instruments of power against Ukraine in 2014 and even more so in 2022, there has been kind of very clear change in Norwegian thinking, and this change is somehow reflected in those in this slide. There has been much more focus on this issue of deterrence, much less focus on reassuring Russia that Norway is not posing any sort of challenge or threat, and the whole policy of engagement has been put, if not on the shelf, so at least on ice. There is almost no contact between Norwegian and Russian policymakers. Even the regional cooperation that was something that worked relatively well even after 2014 was put on ice or even closed when the Russian authorities decided to come to Norway with all those big Z letters on their sweaters and so on and so on. So this is somehow, this picture reflects the change that took place gradually after 2014, but even more so in after 2022. When Russia decided to use its military power against Ukraine in 2014, then there has been a sort of reconsideration of Russia's role in the Norway's neighborhood. The Norwegian thinking about security is to a very large extent influenced by this thinking about capability and intention. We saw that Russia had capability to use its military power against Ukraine in 2014. There was not very clear what Russia's intention were when Norwegian intelligence service published its assessment of security in 2015. They said that intention, however, is liable to change over time. And this is something that we have seen when Russia decided to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. No one, very few in Norway, but also in some other parts of the world were thinking that Russia would be willing to take this high level of risk, but Putin decided to launch this operation. And there is also this understanding that Russia is willing to use its military instruments of power to protect what the current regime defines as national strategic interests, but it was also this idea that Norway, having in mind its geographical location, should somehow develop its ability to monitor Russia's long-term political, economic and military developments, and this has become one of the Norwegian trademarks in NATO. This issue of having a good situational awareness and sharing this awareness with other NATO members is also something that Norway is well known for. And after several years of considerations, several documents were published containing this type of maps. One map is showing what the Norwegian policymakers think about what Russia is going to be willing to do in the neighborhood, where Norway is an important part of this neighborhood. And Another one also published in the same document is another one showing how what we think Russia is going to do needs to be factored in to Norwegian thinking about how to shape its defense infrastructure and policy. So those two maps really show you kind of what is the Russian factor in the Norwegian thinking about defense policy. And those thoughts about the new geopolitical and security landscape has been shared with the broader Norwegian and international audience in several publications. Already in 2015, this report published by a group of Norwegian experts involving Rolf Tamnes, who has decided to join us today, and another colleague from NUPI, Wilhelmsen. They published this small report, but very important one, unified effort that showed the Norwegian understanding of the security situation developing after the Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2014. This has also attracted a lot of attention of Norway's allies. Some years ago, Rand Corporation, that is one of the most important American think tanks, published this very comprehensive report about enhancing defense, deterrence and defense on NATO's northern flank, focusing on Norway's role as a kind of NATO in the north. Then in the public debate in Norway, the issue of Norway being viewed as NATO's eyes and ears in the north has also been very much present. In the report that we published, one of our colleagues, Ole Martin Sturman, has provided a lot of information about this debate about Norway as a country, NATO in the north. And then in 2023, Forsvars Defense Commission published its report, where a number of issues have been discussed having to do with how to reshape Norwegian defense policy and the defense infrastructure to address those issues. And one of the key issues discussed both in Norway and in other parts of the world was this question of how Norway can reach the 2% level of investment in defense as required by NATO. In this, this Defense Commission report has also been published in a shorter English version. Those who are interested in this can go and take a look. And then, based on on this report, Norwegian authorities decided to publish a report that is called in English the Norwegian Defense Pledge, where a number of measures have been signaled that are going to improve Norway's military capabilities and ability to deliver on what Norway needs to deliver in NATO. When this document was published, I spent like 30 minutes to look at what this document talks really about, and I decided to change this document into a text document, and then used a program that somehow looks at how many times different terms are to be found in this document. And this is a sort of a list of what is on the top of the agenda. We see that there is a huge focus on Norway's relations with its allies. We see that Russia plays a very key part in this document. Questions related to infrastructure are relatively high on the agenda. Ukraine is mentioned many times, but we also see, for instance, that there is not that much, but some attention being paid to drones. Of course, the issue of Finland and Sweden joining NATO is also addressed in this document. And then this document presents also Norwegian plans for investments in the longer-term perspective until 2026, and it also describes in detail what are the elements of this strategy. It's about something that is called in English, combined defense effort, where Norwegian armed forces play a part. This question of civil military cooperation is very high on the agenda, and of course there is this expectation that if something happens to Norway, then we could rely on our NATO allies. And this is another way of presenting this thinking about security. But what is also important to understand that is that the Defense Commission has come with some proposals on how to address those questions. Then the debate in Norway has gone into even more dramatic dimension when Defense Research Establishment published its defense analysis in 2024, they decided, amongst other, to present some findings from a war game that was a part of this examination, and this really shows that there is a kind of serious concern for the fact that situation can deteriorate in the region. And some of our former NUPI colleagues, Stoller Ulriksen, has also presented his views on the possibility of war coming closer to Norway in an interview given to Aftenposten some weeks ago. He was asked to what extent Norway should fear that the war is going to reach Norway, and his answer was yes. I think that in the east there is this danger that the war could break out between the United States and China, and in Europe he saw also some possibilities of war escalating. So this is also part of the debate. And then there have also been some measures taken to address issues that are not necessarily directly related to military security, but some weeks ago an agreement was signed among the countries in the North Sea area, where there is a lot of focus on the issue of protection of critical infrastructure as a way of dealing with those aspects of security. And this has also resulted in the kind of changing mood in the Norwegian policymaking community, and only 3 days ago, the Norwegian Parliament decided to agree on to reach a, not only agree, but reach a consensus on the way ahead when it comes to investing in defense. And we see that there is going to be a lot of money to be spent on increasing Norway's defense capacities, and also some new additional developments were decided. For instance, Norway is going to go for having 6, not 5 submarines. There is this understanding that we need a kind of more comprehensive strategy to address the issue caused by drones. And then there is also this understanding that those processes, when there is a lot of money to be spent, need to be monitored by the parliament. And in the end of the day, we need also to factor other factors in thinking about security. And this is a map that was published only some days ago by Aftenposten, showing the access of the US forces to various types of military facilities in the northern part of Europe. This is a direct result of Norway and Finland deciding to join NATO, contrary to Norway, that decided to impose some of the restrictions on its membership. Neither Finland nor Sweden have adopted this type of self-imposed restrictions. So the United States and NATO is going to have access to those military facilities. And in this report that I made a reference to, published by RAND even before the outbreak of the war, there have been a number of issues that NATO needs to address in the north that by the fact that both Sweden and Finland decided to join NATO, NATO is going to be more able to address all those issues, and those issues have to do with A2AD capabilities, threats to NATO sea lanes of communication. There is also a very good understanding of how Russia can use cyber and digital space to cause some trouble, and there is also this understanding that Russia is still able to move its troops on the Russian territory to address some of those issues. So, and I think that this is something that somehow presents a picture of a new strategic situation. One of the most important consequences for Norway of NATO and Finland joining NATO is the fact that Norway is no longer going to be the end station for supplies of military equipment, troops, and operations, but most probably Norway is going to be turned into a kind of transit hub for transport of military equipment and troops to join operations in the broader Nordic context. And NATO enlargement to Finland and Sweden has also had an obvious consequence. Russia's border with NATO has become 2 times longer than before this enlargement, from approximately 1,200 kilometers to more than 2,500 kilometers. And this is also something that Russia needs to factor in its thinking about its role in the Nordic region. I think that I will stop here now, and will be. And now I will turn to this last slide that I have promised you to show. This is about what kind of gaps have been revealed by this by those 2 public opinion polls. And when we launched this public opinion poll, we knew nothing about the mood in Poland and in Norway. This poll was used to map the MUP, to map the public attitudes towards security. And this poll has also revealed some interesting differences in Polish and Norwegian thinking about those issues that have to do with security. We decided to divide those differences into several categories. When the gap between Polish and Norwegian answers was higher than 20%, we decided to label this as very significant Polish difference. When the gap was lower than 20 but higher than 10%, we decided to label this significant, and the same in the case of Norway. And we discovered that there were 4 aspects of security where Norwegians had a kind of more positive view than Poles. For instance, Norwegians were more skeptical to accepting Chinese investments, which may show that Norway has a kind of less ambiguous approach to China. There was this idea that climate and environment-related questions should be a source of long-term concern. This was much more visible in the Norwegian context than in the Polish one. And then, which is also obvious from the Norwegian perspective, the cooperation with other Nordic countries is much more welcome than in the Polish case. And then what was also something that this public opinion poll revealed was that there was much less fear about the negative impact migration and refugees could have in Norway than in Poland. While in the case of Poland, there was, for instance, much more enthusiasm to develop closer cooperation with the United States and NATO, less enthusiasm for developing close cooperation with Germany, and this issue of, for instance, relationship to Germany has also been somehow reflected in some decisions being made by the Polish and Norwegian authorities when the discussion was going on both in Poland and in Norway about what kind of main battle tank the armed forces of Norway and Poland were to go for. The decision was to be taken in the final round between the German Leopard and the Korean K2. Norway decided to go for increasing the level of strategic and military cooperation with Germany, not only by buying German main battle tanks, but also by embarking on this cooperation on development of submarines, while Poland decided to go for the Korean solution, which was partly motivated by the more skeptical approach towards cooperation with Germany by the Polish previous more conservative government, but also by the fact that those Korean tanks were available on the bookshelf while we were to wait for the delivery of German tanks until 2030. And having in mind what is happening across the Polish-Ukrainian border, it's obvious that having those tanks in 2024, 2025 is much more important than waiting until 2030. Only a couple of days ago, Norwegian Chief of Defense presented his views on when Russia will be ready to eventually launch a war against a NATO country, and his idea is that it could take only 3 years for Russia to rebuild its military potential and be able to pose another type of threat. So going for those tanks that were available was maybe not only a result of political considerations, but also of kind of understanding of the situation changing rapidly across the border and the need to prepare for a new strategic situation. And this is also partly reflected in all those other questions. Those who want to learn more about this are welcome to download or take a copy of this report. Those questions are discussed in more detail here. Now I would like also to express my gratitude not only to our colleagues from the Casimir Pulaski Foundation who decided to join us, but also to two members of the Polish Parliament who joined the Pulaski mission to Norway, and also would like to mention that this event is only one of the elements of these visits, because we have already had a conversation with State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday, Peterson, on issues related to Polish-Norwegian relations, but also to the broader context. And today we are going to have a discussion with the Chief of Norwegian Civil Defense, who is going to join us here at NUPI at 12, and then we will also have an opportunity to discuss those questions with Ine Eriksen-Søreide at the Norwegian Parliament, and towards the end of the day we will also have an opportunity to discuss those questions with the State Secretary Onerud at the Ministry of Defense. So this is a kind of what we have been talking about here is a kind of presentation of the results of this cooperation so far, but we are also involved in other aspects of this cooperation, amongst other by trying to invite, for instance, Norwegian stakeholders to join Warsaw Security Forum, and there are also some ideas about making Norway one of the host countries for one of the next editions of the Warsaw Security Forum. So we hope very much that this project is going to improve the level of knowledge on Norway in Poland and on Poland in Norway, and we hope very much that this cooperation is going to continue also beyond December 2024. Thank you for your attention. We now are going to have some 15 minutes to say a few words about what we see as issues where we can increase the level of cooperation. Some aspects of this cooperation have already been mentioned. Norway has become an important energy actor in Poland, not only by supplying Poland with a lot of Norwegian gas, but also some Norwegian companies, Equinor, are going to establish themselves as important actors in the Polish renewable sector. But NATO framework is, of course, something that is going to be used in order to coordinate this cooperation. And but there have also been recently some contentious issues that are most probably going to be addressed in the months and years to come. So please, Tomasz and Tomasz, join me, and we are going to have a very short conversation. And I would like to have also to give the opportunity to the audience to ask some questions. So maybe since those questions related to Polish-Norwegian approaches have already been addressed in those presentations, presentations. I would maybe open first for questions, and and those questions will most probably also reflect some concerns. So please, if you feel any need to ask even the most difficult questions, please feel free to go ahead. The audience is not very big, but I hope that those who decided to join us physically today are people who are deeply interested in Poland and in Norway and in security policy. So if you have any question, please feel free. Maybe I would encourage our Polish parliamentarians to come with some issues that they feel need to be paid more attention to. No question.
Morning. I'm Rolf Tamnes. I'm with NUPI. You barely mention your relationship to Germany. From an external viewpoint, there is a huge potential here. Could you elaborate on the situation, the political dimension, and also the military dimension?
Tomek, możesz mówić, bo masz mikrofon.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Actually, you know, when it comes to Germany, as you know, there is like big shift in our policy after the election from the atom last year. So before that, from the very political domestic reasons, our you know, relations with Germany were tense. Yes. So there was you know, politically artificially created issue of Second World War reparation. You know, actually also the attitude of Germany, you know, at the very beginning of the Russian invasion, you know, against Ukraine was definitely not helpful. You know, actually, Jakub also mentioned the issue of Germany's tanks. So actually, I didn't mention it, but we also have in our you know, armed forces German's tank. Our cooperation also in the security terms with Germany was advanced, but you know, it was very ill perceived, you know, the reaction of Germany at the very beginning of the war. You remember the issue of for example, you know, Estonian Hautwizzers, which Estonian government wanted to you know, give to send to Ukraine, and it was stopped by Germany at the beginning of the war. So many people in Poland realized that this kind of the issue might appear, you know, in the future, because it's not, of course, we understand how sensitive is the defense policy in Germany and so on and so forth, that it is complicated systems of green lights approvals from the Bundestag and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, you know, when it comes to your security and your defense, you know, it's important to not to be in such position, you know, that then you can have wait for the ammunition to your equipment or something, you know, for the all green lights from the Bundestag or something. So we decided that it might be easier to look at different partners in terms of armed forces capabilities and so on and so forth. So it was reason Jakub mentioned we go to Koreans, to United States, you know, which we create as more flexible when it comes to the defense cooperation. So those are the factors before. When it comes to after the election of November 2022, actually, I see that our government, you know, see a huge potential in the Weimar Triangle cooperation. It's also the result of the change of the dynamism in the relation between Warsaw and Paris. So as you know, that France particularly changed its approach, you know, towards Central and Eastern Europe. You know, at the beginning of Russia invasion, France was trying to be also open and flexible towards Moscow. But I believe in the last several months, France completely changed its attitude. It's of course connected to the France policy in Africa, the influence of Russia, in Africa and so on and so forth, which touched the France sphere of interest. Nevertheless, we consider the French policy right now in very positive way. So actually, right now, the relation between Warsaw and Paris are better than between Paris and Berlin. So you know that there is a lot of issues. Yes, please. There is a lot of issues in relations between Berlin and Paris. It's also because of energy policy, so they have difference when it comes to attitude to nuclear power and energy mix in Europe in general. Also to defense policy attitudes towards Ukraine and so on and so forth. So right now, I would say that our cooperation and also approach between Paris and Warsaw is closer than between the Berlin and Paris. And it was the reason why Germans wanted to not be, left out in this Weimar Triangle structure. So also Germans are more active, in this framework of the cooperation. So right now, I would say that Polish government, Donald Tusk personally, is kind of the middleman in relation between Scholz and Macron. So it very positively influence our position in European Union. So I think that right now, from our point of view, the Weimar structure is very important. So we very seriously treat our relation with France, but with Germany already, and we absolutely think that Germany is crucial when it comes to the European future, European security, the EU integration, and so on and so forth. Of course, Germany is not the easiest partner, for Poland. So I say that probably we are closer to United Kingdom, of course, out of European Union, but still in Europe, to France right now, to many different countries than with Germany. But nevertheless, we treat Germany as such important country that we should do our best to convince our German partners to be more in, let's say, our camp in Europe. Tomasz, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just maybe that it's also, I don't want to say a fault, but like the reason why we do not cooperate currently that much with the Germany on the security issues, we don't see the alignment, is because of the ruling coalition in Germany, but not the entire coalition. So basically, Radosław Sikorski has very close relations with Annabel Baerbock. Boris Pistorius is also sharing more from Polish perspective on Russia and the security of Central and Eastern Europe. I think the problematic relations is in the German Chancellor office with Jens Plotner, with Olaf Scholz. However, we do enhance parliamentarian diplomacy. Also, as a Casimir Pulaski Foundation, we had a delegation at the end of January to Berlin to meet with all parties' representative. So it's just that at this very moment, there is not that much of the strategic alignment, but the moment there is going to be some kind of a shift in Berlin, we're going to be ready from the day one to engage.
Tomasz Orłowski, Chargé d'Affaires of Poland in Norway. I would have a question to Jakub Godzimirski. Much was said today by colleagues from Poland about challenges related to the feasibility of the various ambitions military development plans, which are now growing more and more over Europe in general. And in this particular context, I'm thinking of the Norwegian long-term defense plan that you also mentioned, Professor, in your presentation. What do you think about the actual feasibility of this program in the years to come here in Norway? I am thinking, first of all, about possible fluctuations in political, social support for the feasibility of this plan, because now we are in a tough situation. But this could change from time to time, and I think that some fluctuations could be imaginable, thinking about political and social support. And secondly, the thing that colleagues mentioned not once, not twice, how about the power of attraction? Will Norwegian armed forces be capable of attracting new people to the army? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have like 60 seconds to answer this question. Coming from a country that for the first part of my life was based on the idea of having a plan economy, I know that having plans is one thing, implementing plans is something completely different, and this also goes very much for this plan that is to somehow address questions that need to be addressed today in a kind of 12 years perspective. So we need to understand that there are going to be very many fluctuations in the political landscape as well, in the willingness and availability of means to be put to increase the level of defense, and not least the fact that you mentioned towards the end of your question, the attractiveness of this type of career in a country and where there are some other career opportunities that may have attract people more easily. But I hope very much that those questions are going to be addressed. We had a short meeting some weeks ago here at NUPI with people who are going to monitor this implementation of this plan, and they were very optimistic, and they were also very perfectly aware of all the issues that and challenges that they will face. For instance, such an issue as the weakening of the Norwegian currency is something that has also made some impact on the economic dimension of this plan. Then there is also the long-term question of the availability of means coming from the production and export of Norwegian fossil fuels. If the European Union were to implement its energy transition plans, then the market for some of those commodities can disappear. We experienced a bonanza when Russia launched its war, but it was something that have resulted in a lot of revenue for the Norwegian state, but also in some political tensions, because some of allies, including Poland, were willing to encourage Norway to spend this money on issues related directly to the war in Ukraine. But as I have already said, having plans is one thing, having them implemented is the second one, and then having the results that you expect having from implementing those plans is also something different. My say would be, let's hope that those military instruments of power are going to be less relevant, but it's when in 1993 I was invited by the Swedish Defense College to take part in their course on Swedish security policy. Each time we entered the room, there was a huge slogan above the room. We hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And what Norway decided to do in order to increase its military capabilities is this expression of this preparation for the worst. Let's hope for the best, but we need also to have in mind that the worst case scenario can also be something that we will have to deal with. And now we are over time, so I would like to thank those who have shown interest in joining us today, those who have been following us on YouTube and who are going to watch to see this later. Let's have another round of discussion when we are going to publish the next reports of this cooperation. cooperation, and let's also hope that this cooperation is going to continue, because this relationship is getting stronger. When we were to launch this project, I decided to put two elements of military equipment as a part of logo. We know that Poland has been buying NSM missiles from Norway for some time, and quite recently even bigger contract was signed, and on the other hand, Poland also decided to buy Polish manpads to increase its ability to of air defense. So this is a very good and very tangible result of this cooperation. We will provide some important input to the debate in both Poland and in Norway, and hope very much that this cooperation is going to continue both among us, but also between our countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.